It was supposed to be a proud declaration of women's rights, but a protest in Cairo today on International Women's Day turned ugly, both anti-feminist and threatening, and it shows just how far Egypt's revolution still has to go. Our friend Ethar El-Katatney was there today and joins us now by Skype. Ethar, I'm here with Will and Edie Hill. Will Kane and Edie Hill, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me back. It's good to be back.
You know, I was probably like a lot of American women watching these protests, and as a person who has spent a lot of time in the Middle East, I was kind of excited to see all these women out there as the face of the protest, and then you see the changes that are coming around. That's why I was especially disappointed then when the Million Woman March takes place. Very few women show up, and the men are shouting them down, telling them to go back home where they belong. I'm wondering, are we getting the type of change that I think here in America we were expecting?
The thing is, it would be really naive of us to assume that change is going to appear, change is going to come in a day and night. We know that it's going to take time, right? But I think perhaps we were a little too optimistic compared, thinking that the ethos of Tahrir, of the mannerisms that we saw in Tahrir, where there was no harassment, where, women were even praying right next to men, and there was absolutely no harassment. Harassment's always been a huge problem in Egypt. A study, did by the Egyptian Center for Women's Rights a couple of years ago say that at least 80% of Egyptian women are harassed. So we were perhaps a little too optimistic. But today was just especially disappointing, not just because of the turnout, but because of the reaction. The fact that men used slogans that people would shout in Tahrir, the people want the downfall of the regime, and twist it and say that people want the downfall of women, that your voice is wrong, you should go home, to the fact that it led to mass sexual harassment and groping, and it actually turned a little violent. And when I was leaving, I actually left once soldiers started, they fired gunshots in the air to disperse the men, just because it really could have turned, it wasn't pretty at all. And that was just really disappointing because the men were so, we live in a patriarchal society. It's expected that, you have privilege as men, and it would be hard to give that up. But the fact that you were so negative, the negativity towards the women, so many shouting matches, I was there shooting, and none of this was before. We thought perhaps it would change a little bit, but unfortunately it just shows you that we still do have a way to go.
Ethar, breaking the two aspects of this, the response of the men, which will, as you point out, unfortunately take longer to change, but why were there so few women in Tahrir Square today? I at least expected a big turnout, even if the response from some men was not going to change overnight, as you point out. Why so few women at this moment to celebrate this enormous victory?
Well, I guess part of it is also because of the fears. Tahrir Square, so recently there's been a lot in the past week. There's so many new developments. So for example, in Tahrir, there wasn't just the women's march. There was actually also a protest. I was in front of, there was a protest against the ousting of the Yemeni president. There was also a march for the martyrs of Alexandria. There's a lot of different side protests. In front of the Egyptian state television building, there was a huge protest today of Copts protesting against state coverage of Copts in Egypt. And that had hundreds of people. So there's a lot of uneasiness. It isn't the state of Egypt in this week there's a lot of chaos. I'm driving home, I got a call, don't take the way you usually take, because there are people throwing rocks and the military's interfering and there's gunshots. There's a lot of uneasiness, a lot of unsafety, a lot of thugs. The state security building was just stormed, and then all these documents that were revealed. So there's no police in the country, no state security. A lot of thugs who are capitalizing on the opportunity to loot or to create mayhem and destruction. And that's actually an important point to make, that for today in the protest, it wasn't the Egyptian men as in a general statement. There were a lot of men there. So, and this was also a concern that once they heard there were women, a lot of thugs or a lot of people who came just to harass or to say women. So it isn't a generalization.
With the new faces coming in, are we going to see anything vastly different than what we've seen in the past?
Well, there's a poem by Khalil Gibran, who's a very famous poet, and he says, pity the nation that greets a new ruler with cheers, and then it tells him goodbye with hootings, and then greets a new leader with cheers. And this is the thing, there's just so many changes happening so fast. You know, Ahmed Shahid, who was now our ex-prime minister, when he arrived, there was still a lot of optimism. But you know, the problem with the fact that we accomplished this revolution in such a short period of time is that there's such high expectations. There's such high hopes that, you know, things are going to change like that, that suddenly everyone's going to have a job, everyone's going to have money. So the new cabinet, people are very optimistic about it. And I was in Tahrir on Friday when the new prime minister arrived, and he was greeted with, you know, cheers and kisses.
But we'll have to wait and see. Yeah. Ethar
Exactly.
El-Katatney, thank you very much for staying up until 4 a.m. to talk with us.
Yeah,
Wonderful
you're
to have you
welcome.
with us. We'll be right back.
Thank you.